This is Mark Anthony with Mercury Time Price Analytics with the midday update. January 2nd, 2020. It is 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time as I record this. Our algorithmic time price oscillator for entry and exit for long short signals, absolutely nailing it day after day. Our proprietary time price pivots, these horizontal lines which you use to take partial profits when you're in the system, precise to the tick. Let me pull this chart back out just a little bit and show you here. Day after Christmas, our algo was long from bell to bell, catching this move from 32.28 all the way up till the end of the day. Friday morning, our system flipped short at the bell at 32.51.50. On that day, it was short from bell to bell. And then on this week, on Monday, our system, again, just like on Friday, it was short from bell to bell. It got short at 32.41.50 and took this all the way down. Now, Monday, with New Year's right in the middle of the week, I'm getting my Mondays and Fridays messed up. But Monday of this week, our system was short from bell to bell, just like it was on Friday. And then on New Year's Eve, we had some up and down. The system got short in the beginning of the day, and then late in the day, it flipped long at 32.19. So let's zoom in on the action from there. So then we get this spike up in Globex, and you see at the top here, Mercury band upper extension number 1, 32.50.55. I put out on Twitter last night before the open that the upper extensions were at 32.50.55. And that is exactly where it went. Again, that was put out before the market even opened. These Mercury bands are based on RTH closing data, and we post those in the evening. So we take the RTH closing data for New Year's Eve, calculate that yesterday afternoon on New Year's Day. We put it on the chart before the market opens for Globex. And, how'd you like to be short from up here? And that's what our system allows you to do, because when we put out those Mercury band algorithmic pivots in the evening, they are good not only for Globex, but for the entire following day session. So this pivot last night is still the upper level extension for this morning. So even if you're not a Globex trader, coming in this morning prior to RTH where that upper extension was, and we saw a retest of it, an overthrow. And some people call these overthrows. If you're just using a pencil and a ruler to put charts or put support resistance levels on a chart, I suppose overthrow is a good term. But in algo terms, we call that a hook. And a hook is when it comes up here and reaches resistance, comes back down a couple bucks, and comes back up, runs these stops, and then boom. And the hook is, it comes up above this algorithmic horizontal pivot line, comes up above it, and then comes down below it. Same thing on the bottom. By the way, our website right here on the screen, mercurysignals.com, mercurysignals.com. We've got a free webinar coming up. The next one is actually this evening, January 2nd at 8 p.m. You can go to our website, click the webinars menu item at the top of the web page, and just register for the webinar. There is no charge for it. Now, what's interesting about today is we got this little bit of up and down. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We got this little bit of up and down right off the open. Came down here to 32.45, came right back to this overnight pivot, and then we get the spill window out. The first 30 minutes we call the spill window. So get that out of our system for the first trading day of the new year, and then you get this move down. Now, this was a rather pronounced change in the slope of our oscillator. This cyan line, this isn't just some type of moving average. What this is our proprietary time price momentum indicator. We wanted this interface to look simple, and we know that folks are used to things that look like moving averages, and so that's the way we built this. It's just a graphical representation of the time price algo that's calculating many times per minute. But what you see here is a little bit of a kink. Now, it's hard to see right there because it happens right between that long range bar. But if we take this and let me move the chart back, try not to give you motion sickness as I do this. But see this right here? This is what I'm talking about. You see this kink because normally you see this momentum oscillator transition from up to down in a nice inverted U shape, from down to up in a nice inverted U shape, or from horizontal to down or horizontal to up in a nice gradual. Well, here you had a kink. And when we see that kink right there, that tells us that we're going to get a fast move. And I got a question on our Slack channel this morning. Well, didn't this long range bar create the kink? No, it's the time price mechanics that occurred between these two bars that created that kink. And if I pull this back out a little bit further, you'll see another one, which came at the all-time high, 32.54. And this one at the time, when we got this, it's hard unless you look at these things all day long every day, and hopefully you'll become a subscriber and you see these all day long every day. But at the time, that was pretty pronounced. But going back to today's action, zoom that back out just a smidge. We give two sets of algorithmic pivots, these horizontal lines. The ones we put out in the evening, which are called Mercury bands, and the ones we put out about half an hour before the market opens, those are called dynamic pivots. The dynamic pivots have much more granularity. So if you're a day trader, there's a lot more levels between what you see here. Also notice our proprietary bull bear pivot for today was 32.41. So we get this move down after the opening chop, and we get this move down that breaks through the bull bear pivot at 32.41, comes down to 32.36. And then we get this spike back up and a little bit of sideways. Why did we get this long extension again? Because it broke that bull bear pivot a second time. That bull bear pivot, we calculate that about 2 hours before the RTH open. And if you want to keep it simple, it's literally one price, bull bear, long above, short below, period, end of story. You don't need anything else to know during the day. Long above, short below. We're also starting to publish these on specific stocks, Apple, Amazon, the stocks that move around a lot each day. So if you like trading those stocks, that's something we're going to add to our subscriber services here pretty soon. And then we get this move back up again. Now, anytime you see multiple algorithmic pivots in the same price area, it's going to take some time, typically once they break, as they did in here, to go back up through, and that's what ES is trying to do right now. So right here at this line, we've got our short cycle upper band, 32.42.62. We've also got this morning's live pivot, 32.42.79. Now, these live pivots are a third level of granularity that we give you so you can zoom in on the action as it's developing during the day. Because even though we give you the Mercury bands at night in Globex, and we give you the dynamic pivots in the morning, which I'll flip to that chart in just a moment, no matter what we put out pre-market, especially if you're a day trader, you need to have some algorithmic guideposts, street signs, some maps based on how price action changes throughout the day. So twice in the morning, we put out live pivots. You've got AM live pivot number one was 32.48, and that came out literally a couple minutes before it broke. And those time cycles we use, I can't tell you how often it happens. The specific times a day that we put out are 4 live pivot updates, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Now, the first one is a little bit after 10 o'clock. The more important ones are the second one, the AM number 2. That one comes out a little bit before noon Eastern time. And then these ones that we put in yellow, these come out in the afternoon, and these are super important. The reason we put them in yellow when the other two are white is because this PM number 1A, it runs off a much longer time cycle than these live pivots that are shown in white. And it is no coincidence whatsoever that you had this break literally not even a minute after our algo calculated this. Now, I'm not saying that our algo had anything to do with it, but what I am saying is that the institutional algos, the ones the banks, the institutions, the large hedge funds use, the ones that are any good, are calculating these levels at the same time. I cannot emphasize enough how much more important time is than price. And to make that point, the pivots that we run in the morning, let's switch over to that chart. ESH20. So we run a live chart for our subscribers. We run it in Zoom. So you log into our Zoom, you put in our access code that we give our subscribers, and on the live chart you see the ES continuous contract, and right next to it the March contract, because that way we can show you both sets of these pivots. On the continuous contract we were just looking at, you had the wider range Mercury bands that we put out in the evening. On this chart, what you see is these more granular levels. The dynamic pivots, what's so amazing about these dynamic pivots is we discovered something about 4 months ago, that there's a mathematical correlation between certain formulas that we use, and we've got those coded in the same color. So if we go to, let's see, do I have it on my screen? No, we'll pull that up the next chart. But in the morning when we run these dynamic pivots, we put out a spreadsheet that shows all the specific levels, but then we overlay it on the price chart because most traders are visual. You need to see where these levels fall on a price chart. And look at the precision here. Let me zoom in on this. And it does this every day. So you get this move in the beginning of the day, and it comes down almost to the tick to our multi-day trend short cycle. Okay, I mean, so that's at 32, 36, 14, and would we come down to 36, 52? So less than 2 ticks. And you had it again on this bar, and again on this bar, and then it goes back up. Now, where does it go back up to? Price goes back up to our proprietary algorithmic bull bear pivot at 32.41. I mean, none of this is a coincidence. It went up and it broke that bull bear pivot, and then it came back down. And the reason you got this extension down is you had broken that bull bear pivot once, you'd momentarily recaptured it, stopped right at that pivot on this bar, and then the next bar, boom. So you know how support and resistance works. Every time they get hit or every time they get breached, they get weaker and weaker, and then you get this afterwards. Now, how accurate is our pre-open dynamic pivots? How accurate are our pre-open algorithmic pivots? Well, look what happened. You got this wide range bar that this started up at 32.43, and it came down precisely to what we call our price reflex pivot. Now, why do we call it a price reflex pivot? Because this is what you get. You get this move down from 32.43.56 all the way down to 32.36, that price reflex pivot, as at 32.35.89. It goes, what, 1 tick below it? And what does our price reflex pivot indicate? It indicates you're going to get boom, like a rubber band or a super ball. Now, the other thing we have down here is our trend confirmation pivot. Let's pull this chart back out. If you're going to get a deeper move lower, the first thing that the bears need to do is take out this trend confirmation pivot. Now, look, if you shorted this up here this morning, you know, it's a great trade. But in the context of this move down here on Friday from 32.20, this is nothing. I mean, it looks dramatic because of the length of these bars, but all you've done is come right back to here. Now, you'll hear me say this in all our videos. We never, ever put support resistance levels on a chart just by eyeballing what the chart pattern looks like. Everything on this chart is a mathematical formula. Well, look where our mathematical formula put the trend confirmation pivot, right here. So if you're a technical analyst and you see this move up and this consolidation, move up and consolidation, Well, this is where you're going to draw these support lines right here and here. Our system does that for you. And we give this to you before the market opens. I mean, it's one thing to be accurate. It's another thing to be accurate with pivots that are issued before the market even opens the RTH session. Now, notice down here below the trend confirmation pivot, you've got this little beauty we call the price acceleration pivot. So what do you think is going to happen if ES comes back down here today and takes this low out and runs all those stops? You're going to get acceleration. And these pivot names, again, we don't run the algorithm and then say, well, that level right there is right below the support level in Globex, so let's call that the price acceleration pivot. No, that name is built into the algorithm. The algorithm, when we run it in the morning, it tells us what price level the trend baseline is at, where the trend momentum trigger is at. And again, in the morning, I didn't point that out earlier, you had ES on the opening bar come right down to our trend momentum trigger at 32.45, and it bounced up. Well, what happens the next time? Then you get this action. So that's why our proprietary algorithm calls this level the trend momentum trigger. Okay, momentum was still up. It held the first time. Second time it didn't. So that momentum trigger is broken. And then it comes down through here. It breaks through the bull bear pivot. It breaks through the trend baseline pivot, which cuts right through this. That trend baseline pivot mathematically established the support zone for Globex. I mean, here you've got the this is around 11 o'clock Eastern time. This is around midnight. Here we've got right in here we've got our European Open, and it's no coincidence the bull bear line was right where the European Open was. So we get this move down. Now we'll see what happens the rest of the day. Price moved back up here as we're closing out our midday video. Went up here to within a couple ticks of the AM live pivot from December 27th. So this is going to be an interesting afternoon at how this closes. On our live chart, we always put Apple and Microsoft. So if you're an NQ trader, we've got all these same things for NQ. In fact, I'll show you that chart real quick before we sign off for now. We've got multiple VIX indicators, VIX, VVIX, inverse VXX. We tuned our algorithm on the inverse VXX. The reason we do the inverse is so that way it's going in the same direction as ES. And we tuned that inverse VXX so that it moves just a little bit before ES does. And I can't tell you how important that is. So, down here, we saw right before this happened this morning, this move up, we saw that inverse VXX turn up and turn positive in terms of our oscillator. And we took profits on our short here. And at that point, this action up here is predictable. Now, whether this is just a bounce and we come back again lower into the close, or we go back up and challenge these highs, we'll have to see. But the beauty is when you're using precise mathematical time price algos, you don't have to predict anything. I mean, one of the coolest things about our system is that it takes the stress out of trading. I mean, literally, it takes the stress out of trading because you don't have to predict anything. Because what I used to do is even when the times I'd be in a winning trade, every minute I'd sit there, do I take profits? Do I stay in? And it drives you nuts. And then even on the days where you have a good day, at the end of the day, you're mentally drained. This shouldn't be that way. I guarantee you the institutions aren't sitting there sweating tick by tick. They've got computers that do all this stuff. I mean, 95% of the equity futures trading volume is done by computers. Here's the cool part. We've leveled the playing field, literally. I will put our system up against any institution. I don't care how big a bank, how big an institution. Y'all know where my website is, mercurysignals.com. Send an email to markanthony@mercurysignals.com. I mean, I am willing to even do a live chart side by side. Now, there's no institution that's going to put their algo on a live chart for a couple reasons. One is obvious. Somebody who does algos for a living can figure out how their systems work, but you don't need to figure out how their systems work because we give it to you right here on the live chart. Simple as that. For NQ traders, and again, remember, if you're watching this on January 2nd during the day or early evening. We've got a webinar tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So here's our NQ chart. Very similar. We get this move down into our trend momentum trigger, comes back up to the Mercury band that we put out last night. You get this extension move down to the momentum trigger, and there you go again. And you know, NQ is on its own planet. We run separate algorithms for NQ because it's off on its own planet. Planet NQ. It does what it wants to do. So you didn't get this long extension down after the initial spike down like you did on ES, because I mean, NQ does what it wants to do. But again, you can see how precise it is, right down into our trend momentum trigger. Still hasn't gotten into the daily bull bear pivot, but we'll see what happens this afternoon. Right now, as I speak, Apple's printing 298.80. It is hard to imagine that Apple's going to print 298.80 and not print the roundy at 300. What's really going to be fun is to see what happens after that. You've got Apple at 298.80 as I speak. You got Microsoft at 159.80. You know, let's to infinity and beyond. Why not? But the beauty of our system is it really doesn't care what Apple's doing alone, even though Apple has a huge weighting. If you look at the Apple chart, which has been straight up since Globex opened last night, and you don't see this stuff. I mean, to a certain extent, but you know, it's maybe a buck or two. So you can trade those individual stocks. And we have things that we're going to be coming out with for Apple, for Amazon, like this bull bear pivot for the entire day. So folks, that's going to be it for now. Ran a little bit longer than we typically do on these midday updates, but thank you so much for your time. I know how busy everybody is, and we are so grateful if you're going to give 20 minutes of your time to watch a video like this when we know you've got a million other things to do. So thank you so much for being here. God bless you. God bless your family, and we'll see you again soon.